Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Iron Canon podcast, your home on the Star Wars Underworld podcast network, for in-depth discussion on the lore, the High Republic, and the whole canon of the galaxy far, far away. My name is Matthew, and I'm coming from the brand new Underworld North studio here in Toronto. As always, I'm joined across the continent by your friend of mine, Mr. Joel Davis. Joel, how are you doing this week?
I am doing good. Hello, people out there. Here we see we got our first commenter, so I just wanted to say shout out to that. I still got my studio, which is just a kitchen area.
There we go. Underworld Orange County. Let's call it that. There we go. Underworld OC. Right now, this week, High Republic, Reign of the Empire, New Republic, New Jedi Order. We look at Lucasfilm's current breakdown of eras in canon, what it means to have eras in the first place, how these fans should consider them. Before we get to that, let's do the plugs. You can check us out on Twitter and Instagram at Iron Canon Pod, EYEONCANONPOD. And you can check us out just a few weeks ago. Not these notes are wrong. I'm going to delete that. We weren't on the flagship this past Thursday. Although I'll get to the flagship in a second. But we also got here on the Underworld podcast or Underworld YouTube channel. We get YouTube memberships and super chats. So feel free to comment, support the channel, support the podcast and the network and all that good stuff. We will try to get to every message, but definitely if you get a super chat, we'll get to it as soon as possible. Joel, let's talk about Discord.
Yes, feel free to join the Star Wars Underworld Discord. Last week, we took a little break from having a game night to watch Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark in prep for Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. We tend to have game nights and movie nights every other Friday. We have yet to decide what the next game night is as of yet, but we will probably have something going soon. So look forward to that.
There you go. And check out the link in the description below to join us. We're there. Joel, you're there a little more than I am, I think. But, I'm still in there. If you at me, I'll say hi and respond and all that whatnot. Before we get to this week, as mentioned, this is the brand spanking new Underworld North Studios. If you watched the flagship podcast this past Thursday, Dom did a really great reveal of this Wonderworld. Well, yeah, I'm still adjusting to the new setup. Yeah. They're clearly bonking the arm here. Flailing around. Did a very great reveal of the new setup, and I'm really excited by it. I'm going to point a few things out just very quickly that are just things I like to point out. Some paper cannon stuff, especially. You can sort of see it a little bit up. There's an N1 that's from 1999. I probably flown it past on screen. These two have been like off camera in my basement studio there. Every Iron Canon episode, you can't see them. Now you can. Now they're guarding the thing for the Republic, for the Chancellor. The Chancellor's best Coruscant Guard, my favorite trooper design in all of Star Wars. I got to point out also right next to it is the High Republic Phase 1 Bible set. I grabbed that. Just up here are some few canon novels, mine and Dom's. Hopefully you get to read that, and you got right here, of course, is the blue guy himself. My favorite impulse purchase, I think, from a convention. I just duck down if you guys can still hear me. That's just the saga. I mean, the Skywalker saga Black Series. Again, our heads are going to be in the way of that. What's really great about this setup is it has stuff from every single era in Star Wars. You got Kristen Baver's Making of High Republic or Art of High Republic there. And then you've got the Art of Last Jedi right there. And you got a whole Kylo Ren poster behind us. So we go from we got High Republic, we got prequel stuff, we got sequel stuff. I know we're gonna get into those terms a little bit later in the show, but from the film eras and the marketing eras, the franchise eras, we got it all. So exciting stuff. Just kind of to my side, there should be it's hard to point. I don't know backwards. Anyway, if you can kind of see under my arm here, there we go. It's supposed to be so. I got to leave an Amazon review. This is a little entirely an aside, kind of random thing. Sometimes tape doesn't work. You buy it on Amazon, it's just to hold stuff up. So I got to leave a review there. Anyway, we're supposed to have the Afra Pride variant. It's down here. I want it up here, and then I have Yeah, Darth Vader #1 by Charles Soule, right there, signed by Charles Soule from Fan Expo Toronto Comic Con. So yeah, we got a bit of our comics, we got our novels, we got our films, we got our all that stuff going on. It's really great. You can get soccer scarf. Black soccer scarf. There we go. So yeah, get used to seeing this every Thursday and Monday. Um, yeah, and that's another nice thing is it's interchangeable. We can swap stuff in and out as we fancy, especially as the podcast Harriet starts to turn to a certain live action TV show featuring this
Yeah,
beautiful, wonderful Tigrita being right here. Um,
2 more months.
2 more months. Can't wait. Well, yeah, we'll add some other bits there. I mean, we already got Thrawn, but we'll add a few more. So yeah, that's the studio. Maybe I'll. I don't know what Dom's plan is to showcase things, but I'll probably do a little more close up photos on the maybe you resurrect the old dust off the old Ion Canon Instagram account, which you can see on Canon Pod on Instagram. It's there. I use it sometimes. I use it a little more, but yeah, that's Underworld North Studios here in Toronto. Enjoying it, having fun. Yeah, but so I don't know, Joel. What do you think? How are you feeling with the new?
Love it.
Looking at
Pretty.
the new. Yeah, there we go.
Epic.
All right, let's move along to this week. Joel, you had a little bit of thing on George Lucas and Jedi attachments.
Yeah, little Georgie. Little George. Yes. So our buddy Omar, the negotiator, was doing probably some Star Wars stuff, and he hopped upon some George Lucas lines. Let me take a sip of water before I read.
Good call. Always good to have a little swig. As you can see, the green water bottle hasn't gone anywhere, by the way. Just letting you guys can.
Yay. And so I have his Twitter, and this is where Omar talks. He says, "It's interesting to see that George's view on marriage as a Jedi is one that with marriage comes an inherent possessive nature of each other, and it's the possessive nature that leads to the danger of attachment." Now, these are George's words. I'm not going to do the voice. I would. On this, one of the things that they give up is marriage, they being the Jedi. They can still love people, but they can't possess them. They can't own them. They can't demand that they do things. They have to be able to accept the fact that, one, their morality, that they are going to die and not worry about it. That the loved one that they have, everything they love is going to die and they can't do anything about it. I mean, they can protect them as you would ordinary protect, get out of the way, that car. I love that example. Somebody charges you with a gun, you knock the gun out, but there is inevitability to life and death, and you have to accept that. Now, this is where Omar does give his own little analysis, which I think is interesting, so I'm going to read that. Omar repeats, I think that can be debatable, the debatable being what George said, as all this stuff is based on real-world Buddhist teaching of non-attachment, and Buddhists can get married while keeping their non-attachment principles. Monks cannot marry, as it's one of the several aspects of life they sacrifice for the past. So yes, Jedi as an order have been based off the Buddhist monks, but we've seen individual Jedi love people, Caden, Cal, Rey, while still being a Jedi. And so long as they practice their non-attachment possessive beliefs, they don't run the risk of falling to the dark side. I think there's an inherent misconception that non-attachment mentality is bad, when in real things, the real people practice and its goals to not be possessive, greedy, or selfish in relationship to love or to death or love. I don't know what George's hang up on marriage. I don't know what George's hang up on marriage, though, lol. He even denied Mara, Jade, and Luke marriage because Jedi don't marry, and that's what the prequels were coming out. I prefer the Jedi that can't marry but follow non-attachment like many real people do, to which I cheekily respond because I can't help it myself. I have my own conspiracy theory that maybe George has his own, doesn't like marriage because his own marriage didn't do well the first time. That was my cheeky response. But, this was just some interesting analysis and just debate. Omar is always welcome on the show if he wants to talk about it more. I don't want to put words in his mouth. I was just reading what he said. So, this has always been something that we talk a lot about with the Jedi and whatnot. So I just thought it was interesting and, getting to read George's words about it.
Yeah. And as people who've watched the show know, it's something I think about a lot because, I mean, the real world parallel I see is Western Christianity. Eastern Christianity does this too, but both. Just the idea of celibacy for monks, for priests, and my day job working in a for with a church that all the priests they're all celibate. They'll take a promise of celibacy or a vow of celibacy. While being in a church where in the church I go to, the priest is a married woman. So, it is both. But well, yeah, I mean, I do like what Omar is saying there about uh, the Christian tradition speaks in terms of virtues, and there's a virtue of it's not just celibacy, but the within celibacy and chastity is, and the word chastity doesn't mean what you think it means. What it really means, what those terms really get to is stability and is a commitment to a constant presence. And so what I would have liked to see George talk about more then is what the difference between the Jedi of the late Republic versus the Jedi of, and here's we're talking about eras again, right? Versus the Jedi remnant of the Empire and the rise of the First Order and the new Jedi Order and who knows what. Even the New Republic is that there isn't the institution anymore. There isn't the stable presence of the Jedi Order to provide people with this home and this commitment that they have. Now you get, say, Qui-Gon speaking about with Obi-Wan and the Jedi Council, and still having to have a detachment and being committed to the goal and the purpose of Obi-Wan's training. But there's still, I mean, there's just a more parental attachment there. And so, well, I guess that counts as an attachment at all. Interestingly, I just last night watched the Mandalore arc in Clone Wars, that very first one, and right in there, Satine or Obi-Wan says to Satine, "I would have left the Order for you," and it got me thinking how High Republic Padawans, they're actually free to experiment and explore a little more. They're actually really basically free to date a little bit. But once they're knighted, that's it. They're done. They have to actually commit to this because it's committing to that stable presence to the Order in life. And
it's like the Amish, kind of that, how like the Amish have like,
interesting.
You get to go on that, go on that little journey. It's like, hey, you don't have to choose Amish life. You can, see the world and then come back and like, oh, you want to live an Amish life?
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I didn't know that actually. I do like what Omar is saying there because it gets at the virtues of it. Yeah, it's interesting why George himself seemed to insist on it, even with Luke and Jedi Order. But we have a canon explanation for that in a way. We see Luke in the Mandalorian. You see him. I think is in the flashbacks in Shadow of the Sith, where with Ben Solo, how he's harking back to what the Order was. He's trying to recreate the institution, and that's Ben Solo, Kylo Ren starts to threaten the institution, and so that's what flips the switch in Luke's brain. Oh, I gotta kill my nephew, and then out of that is, oh no, I'm led to kill my nephew. I got to burn the institution down. So he's going too far the other way. Not reform the institution, reform the family, if you will. And so I get into that direction of it with talking about celibacy and attachments. But yeah, it's to say it's interesting to see George insisting on this. In a way, there's this meta commentary of Luke insists on this and he's wrong too. Sorry, go ahead.
No, George's vision for like the post Return of the Jedi world, if we ever do a discussion on this, we can not judge. It's interesting because he doesn't talk about it that much. The only thing he kind of brought up, was like during the kind of the early episode 7 thing of like, oh, Luke's going to have to train a bunch of Jedi babies, because there's going to be like 100 Jedi are alive because Order 66 killed most of them, but there's like 100, and Luke's going to have to train them babies. I kind of wonder if George, there is the argument George never saw the Jedi Order as flawed in the prequels, and he's like, well, just keep going back to where you left off, Luke. Time to find some babies.
Interesting.
And there's like a bunch of interviews that maybe insist upon that. Like, I don't think George did see this as a problem.
I don't think he saw celibacy as a problem.
I don't
And
think it's
that's something we need to really. I mean, I keep on hammering here. People think the downfall of the Jedi and the problem with Anakin is they were repressed, sexually repressed. Maybe that's a little bit to some extent. Some of them were, but by and large, that's not the problem. I mean, this is a bit of veering into a sensitive thing. I'll I'll hold off on that comment. I'll save it for another time. But
I don't
I was
think
gonna
he
say
saw
something
like.
else. But sorry, go
Yeah,
ahead.
but I do wonder. Like again, the argument is,
Mhm.
and we did another podcast with the Filoni stuff when we
Yeah,
read those interviews of George doesn't see this as the downfall of the Jedi. He
right.
just saw
That's what I'm getting
Anakin's
at. Yeah,
downfall, and sort of like, well, Luke's just going to pick up where the Jedi left off and just keep going.
sure.
And you know what? That don't need to reform the Order because the Order didn't need reforming. So
Yeah.
that was at least maybe I got the sense that was George's intent, just
Mhm.
kind of reading interviews and stuff. But he never talked about a lot of the post Episode 7 world that much in his own mind because I think for a long time it was done until like maybe around 2011 and then he
Right.
sold because I don't think his heart was ever in it. So it's sort of like, who knows? Who knows what he really thought?
Yeah.
So, but I won't get into this too much. But yeah,
That's true.
that's
That's a whole other podcast episode. Wink, wink, nudge. Yeah.
exactly.
Fair enough. Fair enough. All right, my this week. So one of the trends with authors these days, especially since Twitter is somewhat of a sinking ship, not so much anymore. We're still on Twitter at our Canon Pod.
We're going down with it. We're going down.
Oh yeah, no, but a lot of authors instead of having a Twitter account, being very active on Twitter and social media, they've taken to spending the time, to craft a newsletter, an email newsletter that you can subscribe to, and I subscribe to a bunch of them. I definitely recommend Charles Soule's, Kevin Scott's, the Cav letter this past week. Really was a really interesting one, and he went into he went into the origins of Keeve Trennis and how he developed that character, and it was really fascinating just to look inside his own life and his own journey, and the whole point being to inspire people younger creatives who may encounter imposter syndrome and the sense of what am I doing here? I don't belong here. I'm not qualified and whatnot. He talks about how he tells a story of how in 2018 that initial Project Luminous retreat at Skywalker Ranch, surrounded by his dream location. I keep hitting this thing. Surrounded by his dream location. Claudia Gray and Charles Soule and Daniel Jose Older and Justine Ireland and Michael Seglain, all these folks that he admired and looked up to. And he had this moment of, what am I doing here? They've made a huge mistake. I don't belong here. They're going to find me out as this fraud, despite the fact that he had such a really well done backlog of work in Doctor Who. And I don't know if Dooku Jedi Lost had come out. No, it hadn't come out yet, and I'll get to that why in a second. But I guess maybe Tales of Vader Castle had already come out by then. But in Doctor Who and different horror stories and whatnot, he belonged there. But people feel this way. People get this sense of what am I doing here? And he really had this moment, and he had to go for a walk, and he had to clear the air. And there's something about going for a walk, going outside, letting your mind just reset things and see things in a new perspective. And he struck on it. This is the way creativity works too. He just struck on this moment of, so I have imposter syndrome, and a lot of people do. What if there was a Jedi who had imposter syndrome? What if there's a freshly minted knight coming out of out from the shadow of her master, as a Padawan, and had just Padawan Keeve now is Jedi Trennis, and having to take on that responsibility, and being all, what am I doing here? They made a huge mistake in knighting me. I'm way too young. The opposite, interestingly, of Vern. Right? Vern is way too sure of herself, and that's also really interesting story. I've mentioned that before. She represents the other side of things. Although interestingly, both Vern and Keeve are in favor of with Avar in favor of being more proactive for the galaxy. What if? I mean, ultimately, Keeve grows into it, especially fighting alongside Avar with the Drengir and the Nile and Lorna D. But starting off, what if there's a Jedi who has this struggle, both because it's a compelling story and because so many people are going to relate to it, and hopefully be inspired by her ability to step out and learn and grow and find what's within her. And ultimately, I mean, we know how her story ends, and I have a really good idea and theory about how her story ends. When she's made a master, eventually she sees that the Jedi have imposter syndrome in the galaxy. They refuse to have the sense of we belong out on the forefront, being the guardians of peace and justice. We're just going to go hide in the temple. And as a master, maybe she's struggling with some of this still, maybe not. Recognizes, no, wait a minute, we've lost our soul, we've lost our way. If you're not going to let me go and go on the missions and take the action that I need to do, I'm going to leave. And as a master, if I'm going to leave, that's I get a bust in the temple. I get one of these wherever the bust's here. It's a big deal. I get remembered as someone who is maybe betrayed her oath to the Jedi as a master, or remembered as someone who pointed out the ways in which the Jedi have imposter syndrome. And so really fascinating looking at the origins of Kiev. Also, interestingly enough, this is in that walk in developing this character is also where Kevin Scott got this question: what did the Jedi fear? The question that ends up driving this whole initiative. They're seeking to answer what the Jedi fear, and maybe the answer is fear itself. Maybe the answer is, not their own influence or the fear of maybe that's it. Maybe they have imposter syndrome. They fear their ability to actually influence the galaxy as a whole, and Keith's story names that fear and their inability to respond, ultimately leading to the Clone Wars and Order 66. So here for it. Read the Cav letter. Joel, go for it.
I'll just say, that's probably a more what the answer is. Because every time people do that, I always feel like fans are gonna be like, "What do the Jedi fear? It's the secret monster of glob glob glorb," and it's the oh no, the real answer is actually something a lot more metaphorical and esoteric.
No, the secret monster of glob glob glorb is more interesting than the Palpatine answer, because the Palpatine answer is boring as heck. Like losing their own power and influence, or losing their own power to control and wealth. Like that's boring. So yeah, I'll take fearing glob 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 monster that the Drengar and the Nihil do represent to some extent. But yeah.
I mean, you're gonna have your physical monsters, but it's always like you got the physical monster, but the real monster is what's inside you.
Yeah. So,
but
definitely check out the Cav letter. He does write a lot. He does of a lot of the. I mean, all these folks are fairly open, but I think they're very appreciative of folks who take the time to actually read and respond. And he said at the end of the letter, if you struggle with imposter syndrome, if you feel like you don't belong, even just starting out and doing things starting out, that people are going to make a mistake and find you out. No, there's a virtue in starting out at all. You have something to offer. You have something to give. Send him an email. Check out that Cav letter and send him an email and share your story, and he'll likely respond. So, the Project Luminous, they know what they're doing. They're making this world and the galaxy far, far away a better place. There you go. All right, a bit of news to cover. We put it pretty long this week because we had a lot to talk about. Very quickly, let's go through this. So I got this from comicbook.com, but it's out there on the internet all over the place. The Star Wars Averse online. Obi-Wan Kenobi, the short run Disney Plus series written by Toronto's Deborah Chow, is getting a comic adaptation from Marvel. Written by Jody Houser with art by Salvador LaRocca. Covers by Phil Noto, Lee Garbett, and Torrin Clark. Sorry, issue 1 of 6 drops this September. I'll first go with my first thoughts on this were meh. The Mando adaptation doesn't really work. I've kind of dropped that one. The Rise of Skywalker hasn't even gotten one yet for some reason. Sorry, guys. The Rise of Skywalker yeah, it hasn't even gotten a comic adaptation yet at all, and so it doesn't. It seems kind of perplexing that they'd actually bother with this right now. I guess I mean every story kind of has to have one. But then I thought about this. Jodie Hauser and Salvador LaRocca, when it comes to Star Wars, especially, but everything, they really do have the Midas touch. Jodie Hauser, she did an adaptation already. She did the Thrawn novel, the first canon Thrawn novel by Timothy Zahn. That was really on point. It brought something new. It brought a fresh perspective. I forgot who did the art for that, but really, really enjoyable. She was able to really pull out what mattered in that novel. I mean, everything mattered, but pull out the key points and tell the story again. And of course, her Age of Republic series of one shots that may well be on this prequelist's top 5 Star Wars comics. When I sit down to make a top 5 list, that will most likely be on it. I really loved her specific Age of Republic. The Age of Rebellion, Age of Resistance were good too, but Age of Republic was fantastic. Salvador LaRocca, I mean, he was like Kieran Gillen's Vader, and a long stretch of the 2015 ongoing by Jason Aaron and then Kieran Gillen. So he has cred too. So I'll probably check this out and see if it works. The thing with Mando is it's a lot quieter, so I don't know how well that works as a comic, but yeah, we'll see. Yeah, we'll see how it goes, how it starts. Joel, what do you think of this comic adaptation?
Well, I didn't know Joby Hauser was involved. That definitely increases my excitement a little bit because I love her Thrawn comic adaptation. I think it's better than the book. So
Fair
yeah,
enough. Yeah.
okay, yeah, okay. I'm a little more excited then. Well,
Mhm.
that's all I'll say.
Sounds good. Moving right along with the podcast here. Indie premiere, the future of Star Wars. So at the Indiana Jones premiere, is this other Lucasfilm property apparently. Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. Daisy Ridley, Kathleen Kennedy, Shrimo by Chinoy, and the future of Star Wars. Joel, you want to chime in on this? So say what you're interested
Oh
about.
yeah, oh yeah. I just find it interesting. It's like nothing in Hollywood. Oh, by the way, yeah, this
Wait,
podcast
how is
does.
that? How does that happen?
This guy looks familiar, but I don't recognize him.
Yeah, I don't know.
Dominic Jones. Yeah, I don't recognize
Yeah.
him. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. But where was I? Oh yeah. So nothing in Hollywood is ever just coincidence. Like, oh, what a coincidence! You're all here at the same time. I just find it interesting that at the indie premiere, you got Daisy Ridley and Sharimo Bay-Chinoy, or if unless Hollywood implodes, at the moment, Writer Strike Week 9.
Yeah.
Are they going to pretty much be the future of Star Wars in the cinema? And they're together at this premiere, and it's sort of also James Mangold, who's also kind of the future of Star Wars too.
Mhm.
It's like these two in particular, like she said it herself, they're the next one, they're the next on the docket. So
Mhm.
it's like, oh, those two are together. I mean, Ray's always been the future of Star Wars, but you got the future director of the future of Star Wars there too, along with Kathleen Kennedy, obviously. So I just thought, interesting photo op, very
Yeah.
interesting photo op
Yes.
opportunity. What are you trying to tell us? What are you supplementally marketing? But yeah, that was just my little observation there.
Mhm.
Like, oh, the future of Star Wars, right there.
Yeah. As this tape falls over. See, tape, not good tape. Yeah. I
Thanks.
mean, I'm a little. A little surprised that Daisy Ridley's there. Pleasantly surprised. I'm still like, okay. They're having actors that they've announced, creatives that they've announced are in the future Star Wars films. Rayside rule. Rayside rule. I wonder if I even have a thing here. I don't think I do. I should have a Rayside rule thing. Well, again, I'll believe it when I see it. I think these things happen all the time. Sorry to poop. I'm such a downer of this, but
I
you
didn't see
know,
anything for Patty Jenkins and Kathleen Kennedy together. That's all I'll say.
yeah, it's true. I mean, that film is on the shelf if it's on even on the shelf. Yeah, okay. I mean, again, Daisy Ridley, she's been in Star Wars. She's been in a bunch of other things. I don't know if they had the cast of Clone Wars there, which has happened in things like that. They've had, I guess in Rise of Skywalker they had the cast of Clone Wars there. That doesn't mean anything much either. So sure, I'll believe it when I see it. Maybe the point is to get us talking. And yeah, okay. I'll say Daisy Ridley is kind of in the fold again. She's back, but yeah, I'll believe it when I see it. I don't know. I don't have any more to say about that, or you good?
Yep.
All right. One last little bit here. Is this gonna work? This is not gonna work. Nope. My banners aren't happening here. It's
No,
okay.
not the
Oh no,
banners.
not the banners. Not the banners.
Not the
Bury.
banners.
Anyway. All right. Well, whatever. Bury's Fate on YouTube. Also, Joel, your video is kind of going in and out here.
Oh no.
We're good. We're good. Anyway, Bury's Fate on YouTube. Apparently, official Star Wars socials. You can go to them after this episode, or you open up another tab or open up your phone or whatever. They have an image. Oh, there we go. Oh, you got it. Okay, thanks, Joel. They have an image of missing Buri Yaga on a milk carton with a caption that reads, "Have you seen this Jedi?" Now, that's cool. That's just a nice ending. But here's the weird thing. So the caption, "Have you seen this Jedi? The search for Buri Yaga is on. The fate of the High Republic Wookiee Padawan is revealed during the High Republic show on July 5th, only on the Star Wars YouTube channel." That's weird. I'm just like thinking that because I entirely expected it to be in a story, and maybe the that short story anthology coming out just before Phase 3 begins, or somewhere in the beginning of Phase 3 or something. But they're doing it on the High Republic show on YouTube, which I don't know, that I found that very unusual. Maybe you know what, it'll be all in the execution. We'll see what happens. But yeah, I don't know.
They've done weirder things. They put Palpatine's speech in a Fortnite movie, so
yeah, but that's quoting. This is like a major plot point from Phase 1 that they're posting. I mean, okay, it's High Republic. It can do no wrong in my books, but I'm yeah, or whatever. They're perplexed. You know what I mean? I don't know, Joel. What do you think of this?
I got nothing.
Yeah.
I don't even remember who the character is, quite honestly. So
he's the Wookiee Padawan who, at the end of the Fallen Star, he's being threatened by Wrath Towers, trying to fight off Wrath Towers, and Bell has to leave him in order to go handle something else. And we don't know what happened. And again, I assumed it would be during a in a story, an actual canon story, but I guess not. So
we'll have to see. To see.
Yeah. Fun times. Yeah, we'll have to see. On July 5th. Again, it could be on the execution, right? I mean, that's the thing about everything here. If they do a good job with it, Christina Ariel, I hope they don't just like, I don't know. I hope they okay. Here's now I'm starting to spin here. What if it's actually like a little animated short or featurette or something? Like the first, because I haven't seen much of Young Jedi Adventures, but I don't know, another kind of live action story thing that they just stick on YouTube and maybe segmented out. I don't know. I'm raising the hype for this now because it's so weird that they do this. I have no idea why they're doing this way, but maybe they couldn't think of a better way to do it. I don't know. That makes no sense to me. Anyway, we'll find out. July 5th, High Republic show. It's also in a way of announcing the return of the High Republic show, which is great. But yeah, very, very bizarre in my books. And like you said, Joel, I got nothing. There you go. Anyway, moving right along. Joel, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
What's in an era?
What is an era? What's the name? I don't remember the rest of the poem. So yeah, eras. The eras of Star Wars, and I brought reference to this discussion. Star Wars timeline. You never know. They actually have the eras. And speaking of which, let's start there. Matthew, can you show us the picture, please?
There you go.
All right. So I think the best way to start this discussion is first with the nerdy. What are the eras of Star Wars? As of 2023, when Lucasfilm at Celebration was making all the announcements and the hype, they gave us a little timeline of what they internally see as the eras of Star Wars now. We have Dawn of the Jedi, the Old Republic, the High Republic, the Fall of the Jedi, the Reign of the Empire, the Age of Rebellion, the New Republic, the Rise of the First Order, and the New Jedi Order. Yes, these are the eras. of Star Wars. We never got to talk about this a lot, and I kind of wanted to a lot more when this first appeared, but there were so many things going on. My biggest takeaway just seeing this conversation getting a little hectic, but this is where I want to start. Is I think this is good, and I think in some ways this kind of shows that Star Wars is moving beyond kind of the fan thing of prequel, sequel, original, because we're moving beyond prequel, sequel, and original era. We're moving beyond even the Skywalker 1 through 9 saga at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And how many stories will get filled up with these eras in the next 5-10 years? I don't know. But we are. The intent here is that they want to move beyond it, with obviously the Mangled film being Dawn of the Jedi, the Shirimo Beijinoy Rey movie with New Jedi Order. I don't know what they got for the Old Republic if they really want that video game remake to be in canon. But we're definitely moving beyond it. So I guess, Matthew, I'll throw it to you. When you saw this timeline, these eras back in Celebration, I guess, or if just now this is being really shown to you, what's your just initial reaction to just this right here?
Right now my reaction, and at first, so at Celebration my reaction was, oh, that's cool. They're really going for it. Now my reaction is, yeah, you're right. They're moving beyond film designations, and what they're really going for is this is a history. This is,
oh no, we lost Matthew. Well, that's not good. I thought something was going on. Well, dang it. I'll keep the show going. Hello, everyone. Just a second. Oh no. Oh, there we go.
Am I back?
Hooray!
Hey, I'm back.
You're back.
To find this thing again. Sorry.
You were talking about how you felt about the errors thing.
Yeah, let's actually bring this back up though. Yeah. And it starts as a history. It's actually going to work. I don't know. We got new setup, new internet. Here we go. I'll just remove that if I can. I don't know, Joel. Can you go ahead and remove it?
I don't. Remove yourself. I can't see the image. Oh.
That was fine. Never mind. We're good. Sorry, guys. Bear with us here. Dealing with different things. Yeah. So Star Wars as a history, as
mythology,
as a mythology that has as one coherent story, if you will, that has relationships between different time periods. And his prequel, original, sequel. I mean, yeah, like that.
Oh no. Dang, it is really bad internet, isn't it, folks? But no, I think I understand what he's talking about. Star Wars. Unless you're just in the Lucas thing, into Lucas's Star Wars, and yeah, it is just prequel, sequel, and I guess Clone Wars, which is in the prequel era, so it's a spin-off of the prequels. But Star Wars is moving away from that because, in a lot of ways, Star Wars itself is evolving and changing over time. Beyond just the sequels and the prequels and the originals. I love technical difficulties, everyone. Technical difficulties. Whoa. Okay. Let's try that again.
Anyway, hopefully we're back. Yeah, just different. I don't know. My Wi-Fi seems great, so I don't know what's happening, but there we go. Joel, you're good?
I'm good. I'm still here.
Thanks for bearing with us, everyone. Yeah, I'll leave the banner off. Like as a story, as a coherent mythology, as something beyond just a film franchise, frankly, but something that we've connected to and attached to, and almost to say this is a little weird, but the way I kind of think about canon, for example, is we have this thing in the real world. Yeah, sorry, seeing if this is still working here.
You're still here. You're still with me.
Still good. It's still good.
You're still with me.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, maybe it's his computer. I'm also using a different computer. I'm gonna go back to my Mac next time because I guess Thursday night it was fine with Dom. So yeah, who knows what's happening now? Yeah, I've repeated this a few times. I've said it already. Yeah, and how also again how they're really going for it, going back all the way to Old Republic, even before, and it's almost it's a promise, if you will, promises that they're going to show some stories in these eras. Otherwise, why not make the space for it? So excited.
Yeah, cross fingers if Hollywood doesn't implode. 'Cause I definitely think they want the movies to at least start up at least two of them.
Yeah.
And even the official nerdy books like this,
Mhm.
you'd think fall of. Uh,
We're just sorting things out all over the place here.
you'd think Fall of the Jedi would start with Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, but
Mhm.
the Fall of the Jedi era actually starts, according to timeline, circa 100 BBY and ends in 90 BBY with Revenge of the Sith.
Mhm. Yeah.
Big book. But no, yeah, you're right. Even I kind of wonder as I don't want to turn this into a Star Wars as an evolving continuity.
Mhm.
Although that's fun discussion too.
Yeah.
It's sort of like certain terms I do wonder become obsolete in a way. Like I'm not gonna say don't ever use the word prequelist ever again. How dare you? But
Yeah.
it's sort of like, well, what does it mean to be a prequelist in an era where it's like the prequels are now just a small section of a bunch of other
Sure.
stories that we've been getting for the last couple decades, give or take,
Mhm.
hopefully. So what does that mean at this point? I mean, I understand if like from an out of universe perspective, it's like you only like the Lucas stuff. Then that's one
Mhm.
thing. I get that you're entitled to just like I only like 1 through 6 and the Clone Wars because that's what George did, and everything else forget it. That George didn't do it, I don't care.
Yeah.
That's your prerogative, of course, as it's fair. But
Mhm.
yeah, it is more than just the saga at this
Yeah.
point. It's more than just the prequel, sequel, the original. It's even more than just Age of Rebellion, Age of Empire, Age of Republic, Age of Resistance.
Mhm.
Um, and funny enough, in a lot of ways, this is It's sort of reverted back to how it was in Legends. Legends had pretty much this too. It's like the Dawn era, the Legacy era, 100 years in the future, the new Jedi Order era. So it's like kind of now gone full circle again.
Yeah.
More
Just
things
want
change,
to
more things change.
jump in there. One last thing. I think I was trying to get at is it's an acknowledgement that this is an organic, evolving, like you say, evolving story that, and that's the interesting thing. So we have these 9 discrete blocks of time, but for me, it's a recognition that this Star Wars saga, this fictional universe, is not divided into 9 discrete blocks of time. If the Fall of the Jedi starts at 100 and some odd years, then everything about the High Republic is intimately connected with it, organically connected with it. I mean, it's all about, because history is a series of causes and effects, and of why things happen, how they lead to it, even things that people don't intend or people do. Um, I mean, my whole thing, I'm mentioning Keeve at the top here, at the top of the episode, uh, the cause and effect, her leaving the order, uh, who knows what Vern's story and the Acolyte is going to do, and the Acolyte itself, if that is considered a High Republic story, but, this organic connection to what ends up being the Fall of the Jedi. So,
I mean,
I'm
I'll
really
add
excited.
I'll
Here
add that. It's like, is Acolyte technically gonna be in the High Republic sphere, or is it
we go.
like I've heard like 58 BBY? I mean, I don't know. They said it like a couple centuries before Phantom Menace, so I
Yeah.
don't know. I'm sure we'll find that out, or maybe the future next timeline book
Yeah.
will figure that out. One more thing about the timeline book, I want to get
Mhm.
into like the nerdy stuff first before we get like
Sure.
esoteric.
Sure. Here for it.
It's interesting that that's fine. It's sort of interesting that the only era that more or less coincides with its movies, with one exception, with a little bit of an exception, is the original trilogy. Oops, Siri. No, I don't want that. Theory popped up.
That's
Age of
great.
Rebellion starts in 0 ABY,
Mhm.
with the destruction of, that's when New Hope happens. It ends in 5
Yeah.
ABY, with technically Aftermath. So Aftermath still technically counts
Mhm.
as the end of the Age of Rebellion. But that's pretty much A New Hope, Return of the Jedi. But what's interesting about that, to continue on, is then you get the sequel era, and the Rise of the First Order doesn't actually begin with Force Awakens. It technically starts in 28 ABY.
Right. With Bloodline and
yeah,
everything like
so
that, yeah.
it's sort of interesting that the sequel trilogy, almost by accident, sort of tells more just the tail end of that era. So I just think that's kind of interesting how that kind of all lined up more or less. I always thought for some reason Rebels was an Age of Rebellion, but I guess that's still part of the reign of the Empire.
Yeah. I mean, here's the thing about all these things is all those 9 eras, even the prequel, whatever, sequel, original, those are marketing terms in a way.
Oh yeah.
You don't have to. My point really is, if you want to consider it, it's part of the Rebels story. It's called Rebels, right? The show. So yeah, in Rogue One, the build up. What's interesting, especially for example with Force Awakens being kind of in the middle of or near the end of the Rise of the First Order. Again, these things happen gradually over time, and the films. I mean, this was George's original thing, right? This is actually why it may be surprising and interesting that the destruction of the Death Star is the beginning of this whole Age of Rebellion era. George's whole thing was dropping people into the middle of a story. That's why it's episode 4. I mean, I know that isn't entirely. I mean, there's debating about why he chose that, and of course, that didn't come around until 1979 or whenever it was. But yeah, the whole thing of dropping someone in the middle, right before the climax. So that what's interesting, I can see that. I mean, you look at the destruction of the Death Star the Death Star itself, the building of the Death Star, is itself this culmination of the Empire at its height.
Yes.
Of course, the Empire at its height is then the Empire at its greatest weakness because it's most vulnerable because it overlooks this 2-meter wide womp rat target, that makes it so easy to destroy, to sink all these Imperial resources into one thing. And then it's when the rebellion announces itself as the serious force in the galaxy and that the force is with it. And so, again, that's the thing is history has these real events that connect to it. I think there's a point later on I want to get to, but that I'm thinking about now. But yeah, I'll say that one last thing I'll say about that though is, and I'm not saying these designations aren't meaningful. They are. Like maybe this is the point I'll say in a minute. But my favorite thing, and I'll bring these out, is when and this is the kind of the early prequels thing. You got this cover. This is by Mike. These are by Mike Del Mundo. I'm just bringing these out. Unfortunately, there's kind of some water damage there or something. That's too bad.
That sucks.
But yeah, these are this thing. This is Darth Vader #1 by Charles Soule. This is Darth Vader #1 by Kieran Gillen. And I mean, these are variants of the iconic original trilogy villain with prequel era iconography. You have Little Annie, wrong hand. Little Annie. You have Phase 1, Phase 2 clones here, kind of merging and alighting and saying this is a real cause and effect, real connections between eras. And I mean, that why I love it. It helped really establish the fall of the Jedi and the origins of the Empire as part of the main story that connected to everyone that everyone knew and loved. And so there's that. One last thing I want to say is it is interesting to have these out of universe thing of these 9 blocks. In the real world, a historical era can only possibly be known centuries later. We only know that the Age of Enlightenment was the Age of Enlightenment. I mean, I guess some people maybe use the term Enlightenment, but we only know it was that, and until after it collapsed with World War One, right? We look back, the rise of modern science, the rise of liberal democracy, the rise of European colonial dominance is the dark side of it. These political alliances, the rise of the Westphalian nation state, all these things coming together, classical art and music, all these very rational classical art and music coming together, in the rise of the individual. Following that, we look back. Okay, that was the modern era. That was the age of enlightenment. That 100 years ago. Now we can say that was. We're kind of saying now this weird postmodern Anthropocene. We look at the Middle Ages and you say, okay, the High Middle Ages. We can look back, and that's 1,000 years ago. The real world parallel there is the first instance we have of something called the High Republic, Keith Trennis. But it's Sifo-Dyas and Dooku sneaking into the Bogan vault and finding these artifacts, and speaking of Kevin Scott, and talking about Keith Trennis and how there was this thing called the High Republic. Historians must have applied that label by the time Padawan Dooku and Sifo are screwing around the temple, because they learned it in their class. They learned it in their history class, right? During, Avar Chris is not going to stand up and say, "Hi, I am a High Republic Jedi." That makes no sense. We just don't. Humans or care people just don't do that.
My government's the High Republic. How are you?
Yeah, I mean that's an interesting thing that makes us weird. We're the weird ones by saying we're in the postmodern era. We're in the Anthropocene. We have this preoccupation with naming what era we're in. Is trying to way of situating ourselves. That's not really how history works, and it's not. I mean, that's not how history works. It's not how we tend to understand ourselves. We'll only know, and here's the scary part: we'll only know what ultimately was right and wrong 100 years ago, 100 years from now. Yes, we can have a sense now. There's a lot of political issues that are contested. I'm not going to go into what they are. You and I have our convictions about socially what is good and what is evil. I mean, that's the scary thing. 100 years ago, people thought, I guess 60 years ago, 70 years ago, people thought smoking was fine for you, physically fine for you. And apologies to anyone out there who smokes. It causes cancer. We know that now. No wonder it's banned in all restaurants all over the place. We didn't know that back, when cigarettes were first introduced. I mean, I can go back in the U.S. believing slavery was legal, and a lot of people thought slavery was okay. Now we look back, and there's enough people who believed it wasn't and understood that it wasn't. Thank God, literally, thank God, there were enough people. But now it's a consensus, right? Hopefully,
you'd hope.
Yeah, ideally. Although there are parts of the world. I mean, you talk about sweatshops in China. So, there's that. So, yeah, I mean, what we do want to guard against, and what I wonder the story of Star Wars does guard against this in a way that Star Trek doesn't. And maybe I'm getting into the esoteric thing here, is, well, this is what's interesting. You put up all these 9 things, you tell a story of the High Republic, and in the High Republic, they're more, the Padawans are more free, more enlightened, if you will. The Jedi are more noble. Then there's a decline. George, at its best, had a really strong skepticism about the inevitability of history. That's something that Gene Roddenberry wasn't skeptical enough about. And so that's the thing. We can tell a good story at any era. I know you're getting to this in a minute, but we can tell a good story in any era, and the characters may not be more or less moral. It's not like we live in 2023. We're inherently more moral than people who lived in 1970 or 1870 or 1223. It's just different circumstances and maybe a different calculus of what is right and wrong. Maybe globalization definitely has a part to play in our sense of a common humanity. That is true. But also there's enough people out there who say, oh yeah, common humanity for people to exploit. So
right. I mean, if you want like the most cynical, I'll start with the most cynical and we'll work our way up. Yeah. If you want like the most cynical reason why these eras even exist in the first place, it's the toys.
Yeah.
Hey, 3PO, we need the red arm. Here's the red arm, 3PO. Look, you got a new arm.
I really
Toy,
like
you know,
Red Arm 3PO. I gotta say.
I mean, yeah, it's like,
Yeah.
hey, look, it's a stormtrooper, but it's a different stormtrooper. It's a First Order stormtrooper.
But that logic, where are
Ooh.
my High Republic Black Series? Come on,
Well,
Hasbro,
maybe after
figure it out.
Acolyte. Maybe after
Yeah,
Acolyte. Well,
yeah, I guess so.
I can't, licensing with toy companies. I can't solve all the mystery. But I
Yeah.
think, there's probably a little bit of that. It's like, hey,
Yeah.
we now can make old ship. It's now
Mm-hmm.
old looking, but kind of cool.
Yeah.
Instead of just another X-wing, we can make an older X-wing. Ooh.
And call it an Arc 170. There we go.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It is interesting that outside of like, well, now Tolkien was different because Tolkien was building a mythology and a history. But I'll use Star Trek. I think that's the best parallel. Like Star Trek doesn't have that. Star Trek doesn't really have these eras that
No.
sort of like you go to. I mean, it kind of has either the TNG era, Kirk, Spock, and then
That's
the
the
TOS
original
era.
series.
Yeah, it's Kirk, TOS, the original series, or TNG. You got
Yeah.
Picard, and then kind of around that you got Cisco and
Yeah.
Janeway, and kind of didn't ever do another era, or didn't ever do.
Mhm.
You can't really do the past because that's not. I mean,
Well, they did the Enterprise.
I guess it was Enterprise a little
But
bit. Yeah, you're right.
your point being that it wasn't some grand moral change. There was us now, World War III, this enlightened ideal utopia of the Federation.
Yeah, and it's like I mean, yeah, there are differences for sure. Like Klingons in the Federation are friends, and then maybe the uniforms are a little different. But there isn't much of a difference in the kind of the overall mythology of Star Trek, of TNG or TOS, outside of maybe I guess there are like nerdy things like TOS, a lot more colony, a lot more wild space, and then by TNG the Federation is more formalized, that sort of thing. But it's not like Star Wars with like the old Republic, the Jedi Sith wars of the olden times, and that's where Star Wars kind of gets more Tolkien-y, where it's sort of like you got the first age, second age, and third age. They never do any fourth age. Tolkien didn't want to do that.
We're in the
so
fourth. It's fine.
yeah. It's like it's like the grand history of the war of Sauron against Morgoth, and then Sauron again. It's obviously not as put together as Tolkien stuff for sure, because it's not just one person. It's different creatives kind of piecemealing and evolving it, and sort of like then retroactively saying, okay, here's how the 9 eras work, and who knows, maybe by the time later down the line we'll have a 5th, or have 10 eras, or 11.
Or they'll redo the whole thing and like consolidate things, right? I mean,
and that's what this is all about. That's just, hey, let's take what we have now, consolidate it, and in a couple of years it's going to be obsolete. It's already
timeline.
Obsolete. It's already obsolete. There's no Andor in here or Kenobi.
That's true.
I don't think Kenobi's in here. I think it may be, but I don't think Andor's in here. But so I think it kind of gets into the point. I had to think about where do creatives go into something for an era, or do they go into a story and then kind of the era comes second? And this is also kind of the epiphany I kind of have with the whole paper and screen canon, where I do think we have anyone Star Wars can be their first Star Wars, and kind of the happy narrative of it all. And I'll agree with that. Like, I'm never going to be gatekeepy about it for sure. But I do think we all have to acknowledge paper canon's made for a very different, completely different audience in general. And it's made for not a general audience. It's made for fans like us who are going to consume it pretty much no matter what.
We're going to have backdrops like this.
Yeah, exactly. I'm sure High Republic's doing great, and it definitely gets it's due for sure. But it's still like, even the best High Republic is still probably dropping the water compared to like the best show or movie, in terms of like the amount of eyeballs on the screen or the eyeballs on the page.
Although video games are even more. And that's
video.
the one thing is, what if they see in Survivor of the High Republic? Anyway.
Yes.
That's still not. Yeah, your point stands. You're still.
Yeah, video games are the weird bridge, which I always appreciate about that for sure. And like, how many people are going to know about High Republic through Acolyte first in the great scheme of things. So it kind of makes me wonder, just when James Mangold is coming to Kathleen Kennedy going, Dawn of the Jedi was Dawn of the Jedi movie, is he going, I want to make a movie in the Dawn of the Jedi era, or is he going, I want to make a biblical epic about the
Yeah.
discovery of the Force, and kind of like gonna be like Star Wars Moses, 10
Mhm.
Commandments, and then Kathleen, then it's sort of like, okay, James, well, here's that's a good story pitch. Well, you can work with the story group, and then the story group will be like, yeah, we have the Dawn of the Jedi era that we don't really have much on that. Could you we work together,
Mhm.
or another great example, Tony Gilroy. Tony Gilroy, he made his I want to make a spy thriller about revolution and fighting fascism. And the thing about Andor is such a good story that you can honestly take out the Star Wars and kind of replace it with just the Terran
Yeah.
Empire, and it's like still a good story, but
Or the Nazis.
the Nazis, the Nazis, and but it's like, okay, well, this is definitely the era you probably need to use it in, and work with the Lucasfilm internal folks, or like,
Yeah.
here's some reference guides. Tony Gilroy's looking at Wikipedia because he said that he did. And it's sort of like that's so it's sort of like the era came second and the story came first. And I'm sure even the author, to some extent, want to make a good story first before they're just like, oh, I want to make a High Republic era movie. Like there's like, it's sort of like, what is a High Republic story? What does that even mean? In terms of like if I went to someone random, like, I have a High Republic story. Well, what is it?
Yeah.
It's a High Republic story. What does that mean? I don't know. Like, instead of like, I want to tell a story about a kid with imposter syndrome dealing with their issues, and it just so happens like, okay, well, I want to be the Jedi, but I don't want them to die in Order 66, so we got this High Republic thing going on. Do that. So that's sort of an interesting, always kind of way to think about it. Is like eras are settings, and obviously the setting can affect the story, but the setting is never the story. At least not in most cases. I mean, I'm sure you can find something like, I don't know, a cabin in the woods. But
Yeah.
outside of like maybe those rare exceptions, I always say story comes first, setting is kind of secondary. It influences it, but it's never the first thing that comes out of a creative's head. But I've been rambling for a bit. You want
Yeah.
to respond to any of what I said?
I mean, I get what you're saying. I do think a lot of these instances are chicken and egg. Right, because what we're talking with Kiev, right, is the origins of the idea of a High Republic, right, or of the initiative, of the publishing initiative, and what it's about. And at some point in the line, they decided, okay, it makes sense to place it set this far back from Order 66, and whatnot, and then seeding things in as they go. Yeah, I mean, when you talk about a biblical epic, for example, that has to be. I mean, there's only one time that could really go into. Actually, kind of think of it. I mean, when you have the discovery of the Force and origins, yeah, that's pretty clear. But I mean, putting a number on it, putting a date on it, that you don't have to do that immediately. Yeah, I mean, we do know that the story group does something like what you're saying. Is I have this idea for a character, and the story group then says, okay, this is where it makes the most sense, both in what that character wants to do and in what else fits within what other stories are going on. So, yeah, again, chicken or egg, in that sense. I definitely get what you're saying in terms of era being era as being a setting. That is an interesting concept. A setting, namely a limitation, a constraint, a set of rules about what's happening at this time, in light of, and this is where I get to the linearity, the organic connectiveness of history in light of where it's going. And that's what's so fascinating. What I love so much about one of the things I love so much about High Republic is that it is all written with the eye towards Order 66. How on earth did they get to becoming the generals in the Clone Wars? How did they get to being in a position where Palpatine could literally flick a switch and kill them all? Quite literally, almost literally. You know what I mean? How did that happen? When and what's the before? What's the before setting? So yeah, I mean, there's that, but then there's also what happened 700 years before, and the origins of the Galactic Republic, and Darth Bane and all that story that has to be set at this point in order to develop everything or make it make sense with everything and feel organic and feel historically viable. Why is Bane 1,000 years earlier? It has to be kind of ancient enough, but comprehensive enough, right? We don't comprehend a couple hundreds of thousands of years, but we can say, okay, there was this ancient Sith who destroyed all the other Sith, found the rule of Tool, and went into hiding for 1,000 years, and is forgotten except in myths and ideas and legends. But then comes, then Maul shows up on Tatooine. So, yeah, there's definitely something to be said about what you're getting at. I would want to say more. I'd want to go into more about what is it about the era that drives the story. What is about the era that connects to a story? And we've talked about what story is. Story is character development. It is cause and effect to some plot. I guess plot is more cause and effect. Yeah, I mean, you talk about. I'm trying to think here. Well, yeah, let's talk about Wreath. So, I mean, that's the interesting thing. High Republic has opened up this whole conversation in a way that, and I think the way they did it intentionally to put it when it was, again, 200 years, that's really comprehensible enough to be different enough, but connected enough. And a good bridge to say them they go back another 800 years or whatever, that's different enough to connected enough to what the High Republic is, and the Evereni exile and everything going on with that. Then with someone like Wreath Silas, who I guess you could have a Padawan like that in the late Republic in the fall of the Jedi era, but it's fascinating when you look at the High Republic as being this tension between wanting to be safe and work with the Republic, especially the Phase 1, Phase 3 era, wanting to work with the Republic, Phase 2 with the Pathfinders too, but also have their freedom to go and step out and be proactive for the sake of the galaxy. Mm-hmm. You have someone like Wreath, for example, who wanted to retreat into the library, wanted to just bury his head and be one of the guys who names these historical eras and finds out what's so cool and nerding out about it, wants to nerd out about it, about history. Instead, he's, Jorah Malley and then Comac Vitus push him to be more proactive and say what are the lessons of history for the present time. That fits well with what the High Republic is about, namely the era in which the Jedi are more proactive and then get spooked by this guy up here, and the Nameless and everything that, and the Nameless and their inability to influence people for the light, facing that fear and being succumbed to that fear ultimately. So yeah, they're intertwined is what I'm getting at. There's a reason they exist. There's a reason characters like Keeve Trennis and Wreath Silas and Avar Kriss and Elzar Mann and Burry and Bell and all them and Marta make sense when they are because here maybe this is the way I put it. Chicken and egg. They make the era. They make the era what it is. And their choices make the era what it is. And the choice of the Jedi Council after the fall of Starlight Beacon to retreat to the temple and to order this general retreat to the temple makes the era what it is, right? Makes it this transition moment from this gleaming starlight ideal to the thing that presages their downfall.
Do you think you were talking about connectivity? Do you think it's because in some ways we're telling Star Wars stories instead of just stories? And what I mean by that is I'm going to use Visions as an early example. It's so disconnected, it's not even canon. No, but so many of those stories, you could if they were to say, oh, there's this canon, we're going to just say canon now, put the little singing on there. Yeah. Like, does it it's like some of those ancient stories, like, well, this could be in the Old Republic, maybe this is a High Republic story. I don't know. It's so disconnected, I can't tell. Or even tell a story about here's a planet dealing with repression. Does it matter if it's the Empire or the First Order? or the Sith Empire.
Yeah.
Yeah, not really. So I feel like I guess it's kind of also the mentality of what you're trying to tell and how like connected you want to be. Like
Mhm.
Rogue One, obviously, it has to be that era because it's the story of how the Death Star plans got stolen. It's sort of we're telling a historical film. It'd be
It's
like
the
what we get.
story of how the rebels really were able to make their first impact. It's that first great victory, the crawl.
What, are we going to tell a D-Day story in the future of the year 3000? I don't think so. You can't. But then it's sort of like kind of and I think this is also kind of like, well, I'm going to tell a story about female empowerment. Well, do you tell it in 1970? Do you tell it in Victorian England? It's like if that's the basic premise, to me, and obviously when you
I mean, Jane Austen did.
that's true. When you find out the setting, it's sort of like, well, then that might affect kind of the basic, but sort of like it's the universalism of it all for sure.
Mhm.
So in the same way, it's like like Luke, Han, Leia make the original trilogy era, Anakin, Padme, Obi-Wan, and Ahsoka make the prequels. But I think we're also kind of looking at it as like Star Wars telling the big historical stories of the era. Like here's how Galadriel took down Sauron, or
Yeah.
Captain Picard took on the Klingons, and then it's sort of like, what about the smaller stories?
Yeah.
Like in a weird way, before season 2. I honestly think you could have made Mando a post-sequel trilogy era, just maybe change a few things, and maybe just change. And I don't think you'll lose much. I really don't. I think still just about a silent protagonist who becomes the dad. And obviously now you can't because Mando's getting into like the bigger stuff about
Although season 4 might not,
But I mean, it's true.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously after season 2, it's like that's when you can't because like now it's getting into like Thrawn and Luke and
Bo-Katan, right? Everything with Bo-Katan. I mean, interesting you mentioned that. That's what's so frustrating about Visions. That's one of the reasons I'm so hesitant. I can't situate it. I don't know how this connects. Maybe that's a problem. I don't know. People can critique me for that. Fine, at me if you must. But it's part of what Star Wars means to me is this coherent canon. I mean, I have this podcast. We have this podcast all about, not all about, but in part about how, I mean, paper canon, there's a discipline of continuity in paper canon where,
I mean, I guess I'll ask you this though, Matthew. If Kathleen Kennedy came out today and said, yeah, the High Republic's no longer canon, no longer connects, goodbye, would that change your feelings on all the High Republic books you've read?
I wouldn't believe her because
well, if she decided to if they decide, let's do it, this crazy, like let's say.
Well, I'd ask her what's she gonna do instead? What stories is she gonna tell instead? Because I mean, there are people for whom, I mean, the Darth Plagueis novel, for the most part, the core of it really is so intimately connected with everything in the Phantom
It's not canon anymore. It's legend.
I know, but because it's so organically intertwined, it still works in people's imagination, and that's the thing. And so that's what I'm getting at is it's in people's imagination, and the creatives of Team Luminous have written this explicitly to connect and to tie ahead to the Acolyte, but especially again, I keep bringing this up. Everything about the High Republic is about how we get to Order 66, right?
True. But I would argue that Visions is more true to Star Wars than maybe even the High Republic. I think it's more true to the messaging and the themes.
Oh yeah.
So
and can be appreciated on that level. I guess what I'm saying is, maybe this is just my own subjective thing, is I appreciate a Star Wars story the most when it does both at the same time.
I mean, if you can do
know
that,
what I'm getting, and that's the thing is, so many of these High Republic stories are able to do both at the same time and intertwine them, interconnect them at the same time. Whereas, I mean, Visions, I can appreciate. I'm not saying knocking Visions. I mean, I need to watch season 2. It's not that this is me having too much other things going on and whatever.
Oh yeah, we're all busy. We're all busy.
I'm gonna watch Visions. I'm gonna love it. But and there's a virtue in taking a moment to just explore pure thematic content. Does it even, but using like the imagery and the iconography of Star Wars, I get that, and using some of the Jedi-esque things about what the Jedi are or whoever, but Yeah, maybe I gotta own it. I think it is missing the historical element that is
It,
part of what Star Wars is for me.
I mean, no, that's fair. I mean,
You know?
that's a personal thing. I mean, that's why we love. That's certainly a personal thing. It's a fan by fan choice. Like
Yeah.
I remember when season 2 of Mandalorian was coming out, which the Mandalorian season 2 is actually my favorite season. But one of the funny thing about that season is, I feel like that was when a little bit of a split was going on, where it's sort of like people were not liking it because it was connecting, because it's sort of like, oh, I kind of wanted to stay away from like all the big Skywalker saga stuff.
Yeah.
And then My Fantasy the one was so self-contained and so kind of isolated. That's what some people drew about it. And
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah,
and I think
there's a virtue of that.
and I think I was more in your camp. It's like, I'm glad, like, yeah, Soka's mentioning Thrawn. It's like, oh, something big's going on. It's sort of like we're seeing a big impact of the quote unquote New Republic era. And I think if you want like my objective critical opinion, I think this is why Andor is the one that does it the best, because I don't think Tony Gilroy's going, well, I'm going to connect it to sure he's going to connect to Rogue One because that's his movie. But he's sort of like, well, I'm not going to do it just member berries for like connections for connection's sake. Like I'm putting Mon Mothma here because there is a purpose to the archetype I am making of a politician dealing with the authoritarianism of the Empire. It just so happens to be about, and he just so happened to pick Mon Mothma as the person that was gonna be filling that role. So,
but that makes perfect sense given her story that we've seen in Rebels, right? Her transition to giving up on the Empire and actually declaring full on going to be a traitor and resigning her Senate seat. We know that's coming. Tony Gilroy knows that's coming.
Yes,
bring her
in. He did the research. He did the homework.
Yeah, seeing her struggle is a really compelling story. Seeing her struggle leading up to that we don't really see much in Rebels because there's no time. We don't see in Rogue One because there's no time. Giving us the time, and I keep talking. One of the things I mention a lot is novels, especially, give us the time to wrestle with these things, and so, yeah. I mean, it's interesting. We're getting back to. This is getting back to canon connectivity, is what this is really getting all about, and on a larger scale.
Yeah, and I think, I would argue in some ways that for me, utilizing an era means utilizing kind of a story that would so perfectly fit in that era, where like I think there are stories in Star Wars where honestly it's sort of like, this could honestly be any story. Like just replace the Trade Federation with the stormtroopers or the First Order stormtroopers, and there you go. But then it's sort of like, and ironically, here's sort of the one I think is sort of the best use of the era, Young Jedi Adventures, because you're telling a story about Jedi younglings, and if you're gonna tell it in do what George wanted to do and do that or close in the Clone Wars, well, we all know what happens.
Right.
But, if you don't want the whole, or is Anakin going to kill them all? Well, you said it 300 years before Anakin's alive. So, you kind of hope that they at least have some happy childhoods. I mean, there's going to be struggle, but it's like, oh, they'll be fine. Unless Nubs is like an aged creature, it's like old Nubs in the prequel era. He's holding off the clones. He remembers his fallen friends in the kid pirate before he gets executed. So,
or goes into hiding and meets up with Seer in the path and all that.
Yeah. So so that's sort of, to me, that's an example of like that's using an era right, because it's sort of like we don't have to worry about the kids dying from Order 66.
Here's a good thought experiment. I want to just thinking about that.
I love thought.
Like, so we brought up my Mothma, and I'm still thinking about Mothma. Your point about the Young Jedi Adventures is a good one. The thing about Mon Mothma still. So Mon Mothma's story then is she's struggling with staying within the system, trying to do her best within the system. Ultimately, believes that the system is irreparable and has to burn it down. So she leaves. That means one thing and becomes one type of character, a more heroic character in this Age of Rebellion, right? In the Rise of the Empire, Age of Rebellion, whatever. If you put her in the High Republic, where the Republic is is actually not irreparable and irretrievable. It's actually, Lena So trying to actually bring people together. We're all the Republic. It is the ideal in a way. There are problems, but there are, well, yeah, if you have someone wrestling with, oh, I don't believe that the Republic's a senator wrestling with, I don't believe that the Republic is worth saving. It is an empire. It is corrupt. They got to burn it down. That's not a hero. That's a villain in the High Republic.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's an Nihil. It joins the Nihil, and that's not Avon Stars, her mother. Yeah, quite literally, actually, and I forget what her mother's name is, but she's a
Mara Rowe. Well, but I can know.
Well, yeah, Marta in a way, but I was saying there's the senator who is basically Markion's consort and ends up joining the Nihil and selling Republic secrets to the Nihil because she doesn't believe in the Republic. It's a completely different. So that's the thing, in the time period and setting and era changes that calculus. Again, Kiev is this interesting signifier that something has changed, that the Jedi for her are too afraid to save, and so she has to leave, or just that they've constrained her choices too much, the way they've constrained, for example, constrained Ahsoka's choices too much, and she has to leave. But it's, as a master, if you leave again, it's a bigger deal.
Here's another thought experiment I was thinking about, and I just brought it up, and I can't believe I didn't think about this, because I brought this up before with other people, is sort of the idea of, and I've talked about this, like when it comes to Legends characters, so it's kind of so we said reply of, are certain characters tied to their era, and which ones are kind of universal, like they don't change no matter what era you would put them in. So here's kind of the one where I think their character isn't that super tied to their era, only because they didn't appear in their era of origin. And that's Thrawn. So Thrawn appears in the post-Endor era. That's his first appearance. I mean, he actually did have appearances, a younger Thrawn during the Age of the Empire.
His main story in Legends is...
his main story in Legends is post-Empire, ruling the Empire when it's still in the back burner and the Republic's dominant. So you kind of see Thrawn kind of dealing with minimal resources and trying to deal with that as he reconquers the galaxy. But then they reintroduced him in Rebels, where Thrawn is, commanding just the Lothal 7th Fleet. He's got the full might of the Empire behind him. He doesn't have to necessarily worry about, limited resources. The Empire is the dominant faction. And what I thought was very interesting, and I thought why it worked, is because inherently there is no difference of Thrawn's character. He's still evil Sherlock Holmes, uses art, psychology too.
So evil Sherlock Holmes. He's still a villain.
Yeah, he's still, still doing his thing. He's still, doing, there's not much change of his character. And I thought, if you put him in a different respect, maybe there'll be like slight changes in his character. Like maybe he's like, maybe he'll fight for a different faction. Maybe, but he's still gonna be smart, blue, use his art to crush his enemies and win battles. And I think Thrawn is sort of an interesting character of someone who I don't think is that tied to his era. Maybe his era defines his actions a lot more, but I think in terms of his character traits, it's like, smart, blue, use his art. I think those are sort of universal things. And honestly, I was thinking about some of the other Legends characters from like the post-Endor era. I'm going to be honest. I think you could honestly, maybe with a few little exceptions, bring them into like the post-Rise of Skywalker era, and you don't really lose anything. Like I think you can still have Talon Card as a sly smuggler who runs the network. You can have Borsk Failure, a Boston politician who's kind of sucky, because I don't think their eras define them that much. I think they're kind of this archetypes within of themselves.
There's the word.
Yeah, there we go.
There's the word, archetypes, right? Sorry, I just want to jump in. What we're getting at is that there are consistent archetypes through every era, because Star Wars is so archetypal, and the fiction is so archetypal. But yeah, you can have. I mean, that's what's interesting is in a different era, a different set of political and social circumstances, the archetype may have a different relation to the other archetypes. But someone like Thrawn is such a strong archetype.
Right.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
No. You're on the point. He's such a strong archetype. Like, if he were working for the High Republic, maybe you get a little bit more of a nicer Thrawn, but he's military
He'd still
Sherlock
be
Holmes.
Nihil. He'd still be a villain, right? That's
Or
the thing with
he
the.
wouldn't be Nile. He just would be still just kind of Sherlock Holmes.
I would think he'd be a Nihil. I mean, that's the thing is he had a good reason to ally with the Nihil for
That's
some
fair.
reason,
Um,
and that's the weird thing about the Ascendancy novels and the yeah, and even the Throne trilogy is uh he's not a villain. That's a weird. I don't know what to do with him. He's the protagonist. I mean, I don't mind those novels, but he's also not really the protagonist. I mean, in the Ascendancy novels, I think Thalius is the most interesting. Vanto and Arlani in the original, the first trilogy there. Um, but as a villain in both Rebels and in the Heir to the Empire trilogy, yeah, I mean he's very consistent despite being in different years. It's a good point.
right. It's gonna be cool to see him kind of back, and I mean that's why I'm excited for the Ahsoka
Mhm.
in the Filoni film. It's like, okay, he's
Yeah.
back in kind of familiar territory that we're kind of used to him in. While I don't know what I mean, to be fair, the Star experience, like I don't know about I think Avar, Elzar, Keith. I think they're kind of characters who are built to be in that era
Yeah.
because I think they're supposed to that the history is kind of
Mhm.
written with that historical perspective.
Yeah.
Um, and Luke and Leia, they're a little different. Like I think that's a whole different thing. But maybe a little bit of they're tied to their era, but that's because George wasn't thinking about era. He's just thinking, I have this one thing I
Yeah.
want to do.
But they also make the era, and that's the kind
But
of
they do
point.
make the era.
Yeah.
Anakin makes the era. Like
Mhm.
I mean, there's an interesting thought experiment, and if Palpatine was alive and
Mhm.
fully sissy, but in the High Republic, would he have won still? Would he have lost? I don't know. I mean, some people would say yes, some people would say no. I mean, we can't do that. That's a
Right.
what if for another time. But it is sort of yeah. I think it's sort of interesting. You're right because I think certain characters are still. Thrawn's still very much an archetype, even if the books have tried to give him a little bit more depth of like
Yeah.
you can kind of put him anywhere, and I think he'd
Mhm.
still more or less work. Um, Revens is a different example because he's sort of a non-character, so it's like he kind
Yeah.
of is. Um,
See, Thrawn feels like that's interesting. Thrawn feels like a bit like a non-character to me. He feels uh
no, I agree.
like
I
he's
agree.
he's he's a he's a blank, he's a canvas, and everyone else draws on him. I mean, there's the art metaphor right there. So that's partly why he works as a villain, right? As a foil. Um, yeah, just thinking. I mean, Avar and Kiev, they both represent the gleaming ideal and then the downfall, which is again what the High Republic
Right.
is about. Yeah, yeah, and then the last thing I want to say there is Ahsoka
Mhm.
is Ahsoka Eternal, right? We're gonna see her. She's the first. Is she the first character we're gonna see active in all three eras, film eras, if you will, right? She's the first character we're gonna see having really major role. I guess not really because it's not the sequel era, but um, yeah, I mean we have her as Padawan in the Clone Wars, uh, learning to be out there, adventurous like Anakin, going her own way and then leaving the Order, right? And
Mhm.
showing, and that is the downfall. That's the sign of the downfall.
Mhm.
Um, then we have her supporting Kanan and Ezra in the rebellion, and then we're gonna see her with Thrawn and restarting the Order or trying to do some sort of rebuilding, restoration of the Order, and what that means for her through change. And that's the interesting thing. Thrawn is going to stay consistent, probably.
Yeah.
Ahsoka's changed
Oh yeah.
wildly. I
Mhm.
mean, different actor and different voice, but very much. I mean, even yeah, it's gonna be interesting. Even from, I mean, very clear change from her in Rebels. She's way more stoic and way more. And she's older. The way she speaks is just very more resigned and refined. I do wonder if live action Ahsoka is going to have a bit more snips in her. She's going to have more integrated, or that at least, again, here we go with what the story of the show is going to be. If that's her journey, her personal journey is to reintegrate her Padawan youthfulness that was a part of this Jedi family that we see. I mean, we see with the Martez sisters. You can take the Jedi out of the Order, but you can't take the Order of the Jedi. She tries for a whole long stretch until until the lightsaber droid guy says maybe it's time to begin again. And in part how Thrawn's presence presses that, and Grogu's presence, and I mean even Luke and everything he's up to, carrying on his father's name.
I think because I think maybe that's the biggest thing is like Thrawn stayed an archetype. Luke, Han, Leia, Ahsoka, Anakin, even Vader, Anakin, Vader, they became more than just their archetype. Luke had this character arc, So and I think some character arcs are tied to an era, like with the High Republic characters. Mara Jade is a little bit of an example there, ironically, because her whole thing is like, well, the Emperor is dead. I have to survive in this new galaxy. All my contacts are gone. My life is kind of over. What do I do? So that's sort of why her arc starts with that era. I mean, the Emperor the Emperor is still kind of an archetype. He's just evil, but that's we love him. That's why we love him. But to kind of go back a little bit, because I forgot about this. The story versus the era. I got a question for you. Kind of another thought experiment. You got a story about a Jedi rebuilding the Order, and then a story about a Jedi rebuilding the Order. Luke and Rey.
Right.
Sort of interesting that you kind of have these two stories more or less in these two similar situations, the fall of the Empire or an Empire and Palpatine again. And maybe that's just, sequel trilogy got a little too much with the whole let's just redo the OT again era. So now Rey is now kind of where Luke was, and Luke is kind of where, and Luke, we all kind of want to see that Luke story. Everyone's like, I want the Luke animated Jedi Academy series with Ben, and maybe the Ben Solo thing is kind of the one unique aspect of that. But for the most part, Rey and Luke are kind of exactly where they would be in terms of where these stories are. So it's sort of like I don't know what I'm trying to ask here. I'm just trying to I was just thinking about this in terms of we would they ever put both stories, or are they a little worried getting too repetitive where it's sort of like, well, here's Rey rebuilding the Jedi Order and here's Luke rebuilding the Jedi Order. And it's like, are we just telling the same story with, obviously, I know Ben Solo is probably the one thing that can probably make that a difference, but at that point, it's the Ben Solo story. So
the greatest teacher failure is, and the major difference is that Rey has seen Luke's failure and seen what became of him, and seen, I mean, that's the interesting thing. Luke tries to really recreate the order of the late Republic, right? That's kind of what, again, I mean, Adam Christopher really bringing that to the fore in a wonderful, clear way. We'll see, if we see more of that Praxium Academy. I'm using the term Praxium. Whereas Rey, is she going to be more creative in innovating in something new? Is she going to, not, kind of let some things go, but save what she loves? About all these traditions and integrating not just, I mean, she has the books, right? So it's not just of the late Republic. It's maybe she has some High Republic, maybe she has some Old Republic era wisdom that she can say, oh, what makes sense for this time now? I mean, another interesting thing is I do think of this, and I do want to see more of this story. Luke is on a rebuilding the Jedi Order in the midst of a new Republic that is, it doesn't have the same reach as the Galactic Republic, but it's still there. It still has some institutional heft to it. There is a capital. There is a Senate.
There's a fleet. Still a pretty sizable fleet.
There's a fleet. There's all these things. There's a constitution. the after the destruction of Hosnian Prime, and then after the First Order and the Final Order, we don't know what the state of the galaxy is. It could be completely just all over the place. And I mean, there's a different historical parallel, and one, speaking of eras that people kind of don't quite grasp, the wrongly named Dark Ages. The fall of the Roman Empire in the Western Europe was it was a chaos, and was a just everything had fallen apart. There wasn't any kind of social cohesion across the continent, except for these monastic orders that tried to preserve knowledge and preserve wisdom and traditions. And there's a fascinating, this is a bit of an aside, but really fascinating novel called Canticle for Leibowitz that explores this in a post-apocalyptic way, in that there's a nuclear explosion, nuclear holocaust, and Western society and the global society is completely collapsed, and the only orders that are keeping science alive, the only people keeping science alive, keeping reason alive, oddly enough, are monastic orders, and they're just these small little pockets out in the wilderness. I wonder if with Ray it's going to be something more like that, where there isn't that connection. They can't really have that connection to any kind of larger institutional base, be it a civil institution, or then the attempt to create a Jedi religious institution. She is just going to start with Finn and then branch out. And what there might be the more in common there's the interesting thing. That might be more in common with the origins of the Jedi and the ancient Republic or ancient era. Because that's got to be how the Jedi Order first started. I mean, you have that Legends comic, The Dawn of the Jedi, over on Tython. That's Tython. And Ashla and Bogan and all that. This small group kind of disconnected from things because nobody's really formally connected. They're informal groupings. But yeah, I think that's more along the lines of what Ray or just the writers aren't going to be worried about constitutional questions and institutional questions. But there is no New Republic is the point. It's gone. Ray has to actually sort out what the Force is calling her to do, and what this new thing that she's trying to do. That's Ahsoka, and that's the thing with Ahsoka. She's hesitant to do that because she sees what Luke is trying to do, and Luke is trying to recreate this thing from the past that she saw fall and collapse. Luke didn't see fall. Luke had to experience that collapse in himself. Rey has seen Luke's collapse, at least the 3 lessons, 2.5 lessons. And so it's a good question. I think there are going to be similarities, but there's going to be some important differences too.
Yeah, pray the movie comes out at all, right? With all the stuff going on. But the movie's supposed to be set 15 years in the future.
Yeah.
It's going to be interesting to see kind of how they're gonna make this era. Like I think that's the idea. This movie kicks off the era, and now we have a new era. Hopefully, we can explore with books and comics and movies and all that good stuff. It'd be very interesting. Like for all we know, like they just could say, you know what, there is now a republic again. Republic's back. It's better than ever. No more blow up.
I doubt they will. I mean, they kind of did that with the New Republic. I mean, but we saw it with Mando. Was it Mando? Yeah, it was Mando, season 3, with Pershing and everything. I've been on Coruscant, and yeah, I mean it's kind of dystopian though. But yeah, I guess they kind of did that. Yeah, they might do that. I don't know. We'll see. I think they're just not going to. I think the writers find it more interesting opportunity to tell, and this is where we get back to eras, right?
Mm-hmm.
More interesting opportunity to see what storytelling possibilities can we have in an era without a republic, without any kind of large institutional authority, be it benevolent or tyrannical.
I don't know. Yeah, it really could go either way. They could make these. They could. It's sort of like to me. It's sort of like just there's like the cop out answer of just Republic's back. Yeah, it rebuilt after the.
I'm sure people are
Dark
going to
Empire.
try and do that, but good
Yeah, I
luck.
mean, I don't know what Stephen Knight and Shirimo Bechinoy want to do.
Yeah.
So they might decide, hey, you know what, Galaxy's still kind of real, and maybe they're more communal. I mean, I don't know. We'll I hope we get to see.
Yeah.
That is the $1 million question.
One last thought on that. I just want to say, you look at Phase 2 of the High Republic, the infrastructure hadn't been built. Or your great theory, I love that theory, that it was more together, and then something happened to break it apart, and that's why you have Pathfinder teams and
a Sith war.
or something. What if it's something more like that, where even just the infrastructure? I mean, that's the thing about a government, an institution of that size, patterned off of our real world. Talk about the Westphalian nation state, right? In the 21st century, all of our roads, all of our internet connections, all of our, at least they're private corporations, but they're regulated. Internet is regulated. All of our infrastructure it exists within this. I can hop on a highway internationally. I can hop on a highway and go to Buffalo, right? Across the border. That's because this thing called Canada and this thing called the US exist. Whereas if there's a huge war and this thing called Canada doesn't exist, and roaming pirates can come and just stop me and blockade me or whatever, or in one of my favorite independent comic by Charles Soule and Scott Snyder, Undercover Country, the US just decides to put up a massive wall, and the US as we know it no longer exists as part of the global community. That sort of thing. So I think that kind of thing in miniature, well, more the lack of infrastructure. I'd like to see them carry that from be inspired by Phase 2. Yeah, but you're right.
Yeah,
they could do
I would love to. I mean, I think it would make it unique. I think it's better than the kind of cop out. Sort of what happened after the end of Dark Empire, where it's like the Republic got destroyed 5 years by Palpatine, and then it came back and everything's fine. But obviously, and obviously in terms of like a smaller scale, I don't need it to be like another galactic war. Just have Rey just deal with like a little problem. Just deal with a small problem. One last thing, I guess, before we wrap up, is kind of one last thing to kind of go back to connections. We were talking about when prequel and original trilogy stuff come together. That's my favorite stuff too. And I think in a weird way, the Disney Plus shows I think have done that the best and the most exciting, where you've got Mando going to Coruscant. We got Mando dealing with B1 battle droids post Endor. You got, well, I guess that's more like a paper canon connection. You got you got that. I think let me try to think. You got Coruscant.
And, I mean, even just the flashbacks to Order 66.
I
mean, Kenobi in those flashbacks, right?
Those were good. Yeah, those flashbacks were fun. Or even like those more subtle things, like when the Imperial officer's going through and it's like Kijimi, Hosnian Prime, Tatooine, Naboo. It's like looking through all the Rebel things. Even the new Star Wars game, Outlaws. We're gonna have Kijimi. We're gonna have Canto Bight. We're gonna have probably Tatooine. We're gonna have that. I think that's one of the solo planets. So like, oh, that's just cool. Makes the galaxy feel alive. And I especially love it in the post Endor era because in Legends you didn't get a lot of that because the prequels didn't exist.
True.
A little thing called time happened.
Yeah, there's that.
It's like darn Crimson can't be a prequelist because 1991.
What?
How dare you? Scary.
Interesting you say it makes the galaxy feel alive. I mean, a lot of people accuse everything I'm saying here of saying makes the galaxy feel small. And for me, it's makes the galaxy feel coherent and more realistic is what connectivity does. So anyway, go on.
Oh no, and it kind of as a fan of even the stuff I know a lot of people like, it's like, well, too bad. Rise of Skywalker is canon. Exegol exists, and you're gonna see it in the prequel era and the sequel era and the trilogy era.
I'm here for it.
and Palpatine, we saw Darth Vader go to Exegol, and Palpatine cooking up some Snoke clones, so it's canon. So too bad.
A comic book by Greg Pak, right there.
I win. And I'm also excited just to see, and also just nice to see like Kajimi again. It's like, oh yeah, Rise of Skywalker planet. It's like, I can't wait to explore it.
Yeah.
Different era, but still nice just to kind of see.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I always love the mixing of various things from eras, just kind of all together. Let me just look through my.
I mean,
notes.
there's in the Santa Staros comic by Justina Ireland, they go to Irem, and it's an Imperial. It's Imperial. There's nothing special about it, but it's Irem, and of course Avon is coming. Like the Avon's a grown up Avon Staros has like her legacy is explored. Justina Ireland character, she can do what she wants, but yeah, that kind of thing. So High Republic references in later stories too.
Yeah, is Irem and look any special, or the just now Imperial flags?
It's just Imperial, whatever. But yeah, it's just neat to have the name in there.
Oh, okay, yeah. I mean, that's cool. I was like, I thought it'd be like a little more like, oh, this is what once a planet of conflict, and now even now, like, oh, the Empire took over. Dang it.
Yeah.
Poor King and Queen who got married.
Yeah.
But yeah. Let me just check. I think we got it. We'll just sum up by saying, is it a chicken and the egg situation? It's hard to tell. I mean, obviously, High Republic, they wanted something different, and then obviously the story kind of came after that. I think maybe it's sometimes both. Maybe sometimes it's like, hey, I got a story, and then they fill in the era, or sometimes they want an era. Let's fill in the story, and then let's make a story from it. Because there is a part of me that kind of wondered with the two films, the Mangled and the Ray one, and the Shirima Beijinoi one. Was it we want new eras so we can move beyond this, or was it sort of like, do we just? I mean, maybe with Daisy really was more of an era thing because we want to continue those characters. But like with the Mangled one, was like, did they want a Dawn of the Jedi movie and James Mangold came to them, or did James Mangold like, I want to tell like a biblical thing in Star Wars, and they're like, well, we got a good era for you that can work it out. Like, so I always wonder, it's sort of like, what comes first? Is it the chicken or the egg, the era or the story?
I mean, there's been the appetite for this Jedi Origins, ancient Old Republic for a while. Yeah, I mean, again, something like theological biblical, I don't know. It just seems like that's the only era that makes sense, especially if you think of, say, I mean, Noah's Ark and the creation of Noah's Ark. That's all part of the origin myth of the Judeo-Christian world and the Judeo-Christian story, right? That's always part of the origin. That's the beginning. So maybe I'm kind of stuck thinking that. The pattern of what the Hebrew Bible does and the Christian Bible does there. I mean, maybe I'm just trying to think. Yeah, just because it's cosmic. I mean, cosmic either only. I mean, you see like Narnia, for example. The only places it goes really cosmic are the beginning and the end. And then there's the thing in the middle, because that's also something the Christian story does. It's sort of cosmic in the middle with the crucifixion and resurrection of Jesus. But that's a real concrete, real world event. These Christians believe the resurrection really happened. And then the significance of it is cosmic, but has to be played out at the end. So that's why, for that reason, I'd say the Mangold film has to be kind of an origins. Unless you have something, I mean, that's the thing, but then you have the Yoda going to the center of the galaxy, and that's
pretty cosmic.
And Mortis, right?
And Mortis.
But that's the thing with Mortis is that's the difference, right? And this is where interesting where the pattern of the Christian Bible fits in that. Yeah, I mean, Mortis is image, it's archetype, it's allegory in the proper sense of the term, of a literal thing that really means something more cosmic. Whereas I think with the Mangold movie, maybe they've also a smaller story, but they could actually show the literal Big Bang, if you will, the actual creation of the universe or something mythic. They're going to have a way of us understanding, grasping, comprehending it. having our way in. So maybe it will be. I mean, that's the thing with allegory, with Mortis. It's our ability to what it means for Anakin to be the chosen one and bring balance to the Force, right? That's to me what I think Mortis is primarily is basically about. Then you have Ahsoka and her role in it. But yeah, I'm
Yeah.
just trying to think. I mean, so I think Mangle movie and High Republic and High Republic are the two exceptions to that, right? Because
Oh,
I mean, High
I'm,
Republic is specifically
Mhm.
they set out to do this thing
Right.
and create these things, and it just worked out. They figured out when this would make sense to do the Mangle thing. I mean, I think, yeah, chicken or egg. I mean, with the
I
Ray example,
One
yeah, that's
more.
true.
I'm
Yeah,
so sorry. I so when
yeah,
you said High Republic and reminded me, I didn't talk about this whole time. I can't wait to find out when it's out and when we get more behind the scenes, like what was Leslie Headland's original pitch for
yeah.
Acolyte? Because I want to know, was it High Republic from day one? Or did Leslie Headland like go like, I want to tell the story about a person getting powers and dealing with that,
Yeah.
and dark side, and then they're like, well, we got this thing called the High Republic era. This might work for you. And then she got really engrossed in the weeds of all
Yeah.
that, because it's sort of like, again, it's sort of like general audiences. You're not going to market a High Republic show. I'm like, what's that
What?
mean?
Yeah,
It's like you're gonna
yeah,
market like intrigue, women in cloaks. Maybe you'll see Jedi with the robes, and that's cool. Like, okay, it's different. There's something different. Definitely not the Star Wars I'm used to, because the Jedi got fancy robes.
yeah.
Like that's another one where I'm like, I want to know. I want to know
That
what
is
Leslie
interesting.
Headland going to Lucasfilm back then. What
Mhm.
her initial elevator pitch to Kathleen Kennedy was, and then how that evolves into Acolyte and the High Republic connections and all that stuff. Because I want to know. That
Yeah.
just sounds interesting to me.
I mean, that gets precisely to your whole fan versus more casual viewer
Mhm.
distinction, because they're definitely marketing it to us as the High Republic. I mean, the celebration,
Right.
the whole acolyte segment in the High Republic panel, right? And having this green lady, played by Alyssa Hilton's wife,
Mhm.
we know we lost our minds when we just found out about it. Everyone in the room lost their minds when they saw it. But yeah, it's what does it mean? We have the shorthand of what it
Right.
means. Those of us who have read the stories and think about it, and make a podcast that your home for High
Yeah.
Republic and Star Wars Underworld Podcast Network. Um, yeah, but yeah, that'll be fascinating to see what her process was. Also, again, fascinating, similar to people who play Survivor, but even more so because this is going to be more connected. Uh,
Mhm. It's in the
more,
era.
yeah, well, but it's more explicitly tying into the story that Team Luminous is writing and telling, how they're gonna start asking this question of what actually is the High Republic? What's this about? At least read Wikipedia articles or say, hey Matthew, what's can I borrow your novel here? Borrow your copy or whatever, or go to the store and buy them yourself or whatever. Uh, yeah, that kind of. I mean, that excites me. I'm happy for that. Here for that, or just people who just don't care and just want a fun story. But yeah, it's a question of who cares about it being situated historically, or who or not, or to different levels as well.
Right.
Yeah.
Um. And I think that's it. I'll end it off with something you brought up earlier about the Toronto mayor news.
Yeah.
Olivia Chow seems to be the winner. So
Really? Wow. Okay. That surprised me.
yeah, Olivia
Thanks for
Chow wins the mayor's race tonight per the CBC.
she
So Canadian
just
politics.
she ran. So she was the wife of the Social Democratic, uh well, the leader. What, she was married to the leader. She's also an MP. That's surprising. She ran before and she did not do well. So that's exciting. There we go. Hope remains. I'm
And
biased.
and on a good note, because I saw
Yeah.
that just randomly
Yeah.
while looking up some stuff to make sure I didn't
Yes.
forget anything.
Those
It's
of
like,
you
oh,
who think like I do politically, that's a good thing. I'll just say it's a good thing. There we go.
hooray! But yeah, I think that should do it. I think this was a good topic.
Yeah.
Yay!
Yeah, really great. Classic. One of those classic Ion Cannon deep dives into what is canon connectivity era's story, plot,
Chicken
real world
egg.
connections, all the chicken egg, yeah, all that. It hit on all our classic cylinders. Great episode to debut the new set, at least for Ion Cannon. Yeah, and definitely, yeah, really enjoyable diving into this one. Thanks everyone for sticking it out, for watching. Let us know what you thought of our conversation. What do you think all these eras mean? What do you think about connectivity through eras, relationship between era and story and character? Comment below in the comment sections on all the socials, wherever you see this. Underworld YouTube, Underworld Facebook, Underworld Twitter, Iron Cannon Twitter, Iron Cannon Twitch. Let us know. Also, yeah, give us a like and a follow on Twitter and Instagram at Ion Cannon Pod, EYEONCANONPOD. And yeah, give us a follow there, subscribe, and to all these socials if you haven't done so already. Joel, where can they find you on the internet?
You can find me at JID2021. Again, JID2021 on Twitter. You can also find me at the Star Wars Underworld Discord, where we all have movie night and game nights every other Friday. And of course, follow me at Ion Cannon Pod, where recently I put an interesting Twitter thread of, is something a revolution if the elites don't change?
Interesting question. Maybe something for another episode one day. Who knows?
Maybe.
There we go. Yeah, you can follow me on NEUG485, where I promise I will be fixing the soccer banner here, soccer scarf here. And that on Canon Pod, where I will do more about the this background, give it a little more detail here. On Instagram at MNEUG1138. Photos of my nieces, photos of different things I see in the world, and on Twitter a bit more Star Wars there. Again, at Ion Cannon Pod, EYEONCANONPOD. Also, thanks for joining us. If you're listening to this on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, we'll find all our episodes there as well. Next week, as teased, as promised, whatnot, we are going to dive into what is the George Lucas vision. I've used that phrase quite a bit, but I think it's time to really unpack it and discuss what it might mean.
Well, Matthew, we all know the vision. Jar Jar is the key.
Well, yes. Jar Jar is the key to everything. That's going to be a part. We got to talk about that. The George Lucas vision, what it means to stick to it, what it means to depart from it, what it means to be true to it or false to it, or all the above at both at the same time. Who knows? Anyway, until then, Joel, let's blow this thing and head home.